When they're going to actually start talking about living a carbon aware life? Well, let's start talking about it right now. This is, of course, something to talk about from the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center. And I'd like to acknowledge that the community center is on the ancestral homeland of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Suquamish tribe, the people of the clear salt water. We are grateful for their hospitality and we honor them. Also, I'd like to mention that our programming is supported through sponsorship from Fieldstone Communities of Bainbridge Island. Fieldstone offers innovative and compassionate care. They offer day stay and respite programs, and they have some apartments, memory care apartments right now on Rolling Bay that are open for tours. If you'd like to learn more about any of this, 360-689-4314 is the number to call. And today, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about carbon awareness, and our wonderful volunteer and partner in what's the opposite of crime? Righteousness. Anne Lovejoy is here.
I don't think I've ever been a partner in righteousness before, but I like that. That's great. Thanks everybody for showing up, especially thanks to Peggy and Barbara for being willing to share some of their experiences with trying to attempt a carbon diet and trying to reduce the amount of waste we produce, both things that really add up in our poor beleaguered planet, right? And so I was kind of thinking about this conversation and hoping that what we can really come away with is some very practical first steps, ways that we can individually make a difference in our lives. And you remember we used to talk a lot about voting with our pocketbook. And I feel like this is a way to do that in a lot of ways, like voting for the planet, supporting the planet, really starts at, for me, kind of starts at the grocery store. And it starts with every time I make a purchase of something, like my secondhand Ralph Lauren shirt from the Children's Orthopedic Boutique, which cost me a whole $1. But making that kind of choice can really add up over time, even though each individual piece of it might seem really small. I wondered if either one of you wants to kind of start off and talk a little about your inspiration for deciding to start making significant changes in your own life.
It's been going on for so long, I can't really tell you when, the light bulb started going on. And then, of course, the more you learn, the more you want to adjust your choices. So I think a guiding principle for me is I kind of have this decision-making matrix about any of my purchases. And I always try and think about the whole cost, because I don't think we think about that. We think, we think about convenience or is it recyclable, but the whole cost is a much bigger picture. And I think the planet is paying that cost. And typically lower income people, marginalized communities are also paying that cost with their health more directly than we are, in our beautiful, privileged community that we live in. So for instance, at the grocery store, I always buy bulk. I take my jars, well, let me back up. So my decision-making matrix starts with the packaging. If it's packaging that can't really be recycled, I typically don't buy it. I buy bulk as much as I can. I go to farmer's market. And then my second one is it's safe. So I don't buy stuff that's that's got pesticides. I typically buy all organic. And when you think about the safety of any product, whether it's food or body care products or laundry soap, I use the Environmental Working Group's, EWG's database. They analyze all this stuff in terms of their ingredients, whether they're safe, whether they're not safe. So to me, I don't always remember to go to EWG, but I'm trying to, make that a built-in thing.
Yeah, actually, that's a great website. Thank you for bringing that up. And maybe Reed, can you put that in the chat? Because the Environmental Working Groups really has been great for many, many years. And they were, as far as I know, they were kind of the first to publish like ingredients of stuff. So you could look at that toothpaste, you could look at that shampoo and say, oh, actually, or that eye drops or practically anything. And that I found really exciting. Gosh, you know, there are a lot of we do get ingredients listed on many products, but we don't always know what the heck they are, right? And it's not enough to just say propylene glycol. You got to know what's the effect of that and where does it come from. And that's where the environmental working group is really awesome.
Right.
Peggy, have you used that too? Or
I haven't, well, maybe a long time ago. I haven't used that recently, but I wrote it down, and that's something I probably will do then.
Call from.
well, thanks.
Sorry about that.
I think one of the pieces that I found really useful too is figuring out that some manufacturers regularly show up on the environmental working group as using really benign ingredients. And then you start to build trust in a company, which there's a lot of what we call greenwashing, where something will get trendy and suddenly everybody's using rosemary extract or something. But it doesn't really mean that everything else they're using is benign. And one thing that I did not know for a long time is that companies don't have to list ingredients if they're considered to be inerts. In other words, they're not the active ingredient. They don't have to list that. And that means there's a lot of stuff in a lot of products that we have no clue what they are. And some of them have interactions, so it's a very complex thing, but especially with personal care products, I really think that's important because, your skin is your biggest organ and it's a very absorptive organ. And when you put stuff on it, I mean, think about all those shampoos that say adds body. No wonder we're all 10 pounds heavier. Okay, not really that, but there are things in there that are, getting right in that are probably shouldn't be, right? So learning to really be a wiser shopper, I think is really an important piece for our health and the health of the planet too.
One thing
Well,
that Barbara's
go ahead.
comment made me think of was when she talked about the whole cost of things. So when you look at, how is this product impacting the environment, like palm oil and things like that, but also what kind of carbon footprint does this product have? How far away is it being shipped? Things like that. You start to think about those things, and one small purchase has a big impact.
Yeah, especially when you think that the average item on the grocery store has already traveled like at least 1,500 miles, right? That's kind of staggering. And, then you think about, well, they're not growing bananas in Ohio, as far as I know, right? So some of our food is coming a really long way. And there is a hidden cost to that, because when you're paying 79 cents a pound for something that's come more like 3,500 miles, you can tell there's inequity built into that process, right? Just as a random example. So Peggy, say a little about the carbon diet idea.
Well, I've started talking this up a little bit because I think it's really important to talk about. And I was pretty involved in the climate movement quite a long time ago. And then I kind of wandered off to the social justice movement. And it was easy to kind of forget or put on the back burner those issues about climate. When you get involved in one area of activism. And I think what really has brought me back is climate change itself and the impact it's having in Africa, in Pakistan right now. All these places that are like, huge floods and huge forest fires where they've never had forest fires. And, the way it's impacting people. And so it's kind of like, whoa, all the things that I'm doing, I have to be more conscious about. And one of the things also that got me kind of back on this track was lockdown. Think about how good lockdown was for the planet. In Scotland, the animals came out, our carbon numbers dropped. I mean, there were so many good planet things that happened when we all stayed home, and there were a lot of economic impacts on businesses, but I think that we have to kind of rethink the whole economic thing of, how do we live? How do we exchange, goods and services? And how can that be a complement to what we're doing with the planet rather than something that's harmful?
Definitely agree with that. And Barbara, I know you've done a lot of looking into how to avoid using single-use plastics, for instance, which are one of the hugest items in our waste stream, right?
Right. What would you like me to say about that? I could say a lot. So I took this great class. It was an online class called Beyond Plastics through Bennington College in Vermont. And it's taught by a woman named Judith Enck, E-N-C-K. And it was incredibly informative and, a little overwhelming. But it's been going on and very successful, and the class numbers are growing all the time. And she actually started that class to develop a network of activists. And so that exists, and there are subgroups. One group has taken on plastic turf, for sports fields. And then there's another one that's involved in pushback and media pushback, using Twitter about single-use plastic. So let me just say, part of this conversation we had beforehand, or email conversation about where could we improve, for me, I am not good at using social media to push back. So I am good about not sending my dollars to businesses, but I am not good about telling them about it on a regular basis. Gee, I would love to have bought your strawberries, but they came in a clamshell, that kind of thing. But anyway, that class has been really extraordinary, and their website is open to anybody. So if you want to go and learn about anything related to plastic, that's a great way to go.
And we do have options closer to home. Like, for instance, I just noticed very recently that our wonderful town and country markets used to carry laundry soap in. There were several kinds that were available in cardboard boxes, which I always chose. Well, all of a sudden, those cardboard boxes are gone. The same brand is available, but now it's in a single-use plastic container. So I discovered that to make a comment these days, you have to go online. You can't just fill out a form at the check stand anymore. But I did. I went online, and the only place I could find was kind of in the shopping, like, what do you need from us thing? And so I just made that comment. I haven't heard back anything yet, but I think if enough people do that kind of thing repeatedly, we're going to see the effects of that, at least locally. But that's a beginning, right? And town and country markets, there's 5 of them, right? So maybe pushing back and trying that with Safeway too. I think making our ideas known to local businesses, we can also spread out to bigger ones like Costco. I don't know how many times I've written to Costco and never gotten any response, but that doesn't mean that the letters don't pile up somewhere, right? But just saying over and over and over, please don't sell kitty litter in big plastic things or whatever, right? Choose your battle. But I think as consumers, we forget that we actually do have some power.
Well, I think for me, at least, my choice is, what am I going to bring into my house? And am I going to be able to recycle it in a meaningful way? And so I just tend not to buy stuff that's not going to be recyclable. Oh, something about single-use plastics. There's a group out of Fort Collins, Colorado, that's like an affiliate of the Beyond Plastics. And they have formed a trash mob. They call it the Foco Trash Mob. So last year they did, by email and mail, 2 events, one focused on Hershey's and one focused on Frito-Lay. And they mailed the Frito-Lay non-recyclable single-use plastic bags into the administration, and they send it with a letter that's really well thought out and says, you're big mover and shaker. We believe you could do better in packaging. We suggest these alternatives. So it's really good. And then this year in July, they focused on Trader Joe's. And I think Trader Joe's is unique in that it has, it generates its own products, its own packaging, its own everything. So anyway, you might want to check Foco Trash Mob out if you're interested, because they're going to continue to identify different companies, big companies, and try and give consumer feedback about their packaging in a helpful way, I think.
And another
Yeah.
thing you can think about too is when you see something like a company that's talking about all the wonderful things it does, you can actually keep looking and find out if they're actually doing anything and what that actually looks like. And sometimes it's not there at all. You know, they're talking about what they might do in the future, they'd like to do, but it's not what they are doing, which is usually pretty much nothing. So it's, you know, a little further investigation, and it doesn't take very much. You can uncover companies you'd rather avoid, I think. But
Right.
Peggy, I was kind of interested in something that you don't do, which is drive. Very
Well, I do drive, but what I came up with when I kind of, began to think about this was, how much do I drive? Like, Rita said, I live on the north end of the island. It's very smart when people live in town. That's a very smart way to live because you can walk to the grocery store if you want, or if you choose to drive, it's only like, less than a mile, to go to the grocery store or whatever. You can ride your bike, you can walk, you can bring a cart. But when you live 6 miles away and you're a little nervous about getting on your bike with the state of bike lanes on Bainbridge, you drive. And I was pretty unconscious about driving. And so what I started to do this summer, and it's just really a matter of my planning. It's like, if I have to go to town for a meeting or for this or for that, what else can I do with that trip? Can I put everything I'm doing into one trip? My goal is like not to go out more than once a week. I will tell you right now, it's not really, I mean, it's working, but it's not working. At some weeks it's better than other weeks because public meetings now have to be in person. And so you actually, people on committees all over the state now have to physically go and to a space, a public space, to have a meeting. And that's from Jay Inslee. And that's really disappointing to me because he's a climate, a conscious governor. But anyway, so, I think of the thousands of public meetings that happen in Washington state. I mean, thousands and thousands, because you have the city councils, you have the little committees, like I'm on the REACT committee, the Race Equity Advisory Committee, other committees. I mean, Bainbridge Island probably has 10 or 12 committees, and a lot of them, they mostly meet either once a month or twice a month. And so all those people have to drive in to City Hall, and so it's just so much carbon. So what I am trying to do now is to say, okay, how can I do everything in one trip? So like an example is this afternoon, I have to go to town because I have an appointment. So I'm going to go to the food bank and drop off my extra zucchini. I'm going to go to the library and pick up all my holds. I'm going to go pick up that plant milk at the grocery store. I'm going to go and meet, my appointment. And then there's REACT is having a meeting with Blair. So the trick for me is to remember all that stuff and not to come home and have forgotten. So lists are my friends now. And I'm just trying. And now, the other thing I thought of the other day is, what if when I get gas, I push that little button, on my thing and track, kind of track how much gas I'm using. And then also because I can't afford really a new car, electric car, and I'm really happy a lot of people can. I'm hoping my next car will be like some kind of hybrid or something. But right now I drive a car that gets 35 miles to the gallon. And that's, I guess, used to be good, but that isn't so good nowadays. And so if I can drive it less, so I'm thinking, what if I could just do one tank a month, which is 250 miles? That's kind of my goal. I don't think I'm there yet. So that's why I pushed my little button the other day. But if I could just kind of really plan. And I'm even starting, you know, like when people call me and say, oh, let's get together, I say, wait a minute, I'm going to be in town on the 12th. So how about if we get together that day, you know, and then try and structure everything. But, you know, I've got to have the list or I'll forget, you know, or I'll leave my prescription or whatever. So anyway.
I do that too, Peggy.
Yay for lists.
Every single day. You know, that's right though, because if you can stack things up, I mean, I remember doing that years ago and people thought it was the weirdest thing they ever heard. It's like, well, of course you just run into town because you need onion buns. It's like, whoa, no. I mean, I think that consciousness, sometimes we have it for a period in our life. Things happen, the life gets complicated, and we kind of let go of some of our lived values. And then kind of rediscovering, maybe it's time to really think that one through again. Another one for me that's huge is not buying. I haven't bought anything from Amazon in like 4 years now, because I think it's so easy to push that button. And even during the pandemic, when a lot of people were doing it, it turned out that Amazon became one of the greatest creators of waste on the planet. All those packages, all those boxes that don't get recycled, all the stuffing inside them, all the single-use plastics, and you know, it's like huge. And then there are delivery trucks going everywhere. In my little neighborhood here in the mobile home park in Winslow, we get Amazon delivery trucks and other ones too, FedEx and so forth, many times a day, probably 6, 8, 10 times a day. I see those trucks passing my house. So a lot of us have become more dependent on what I call lazy shopping, but it's also destructive of community, because especially as seniors, if we want a thriving downtown that seniors can walk to, seniors who live in senior housing, then we need to support local businesses in powerful, positive ways so that those businesses can stay open and be there for our people. Lena, looks like you have a comment.
Yes, actually, thank you, Anne. I wanted to kind of piggyback onto what you were saying with the ordering online, especially due to the pandemic. And our family ordered online a lot, like most people I know. And we still do some online ordering, only because it's physically hard for me as I recover from surgery, my mom being elderly and disabled in certain areas. It's hard for us to physically get out and say, even walk the store of Safeway or walk the store of Walmart's not even an option for both of us distance wise. So we still do have to kind of rely on the online. But I did want to add too, I do notice that it's becoming more apparent to us how much waste is in the packaging and how much packaging we are actually accumulating here. And it's becoming overwhelming for us as the consumer going, how do we recycle and get rid of this? Our garbage is exploding because it's, you know, shifting right through to receiving this stuff. And what do we do with the waste of it? And it's growing on one end after we receive it on the other, kind of thing. So that was, wanted to tag team with you on that, and not just ordering random stuff, but even our medications that some of us get in the mail that have to be refrigerated. Mm-hmm. They come in cardboard boxes with a styrofoam box inside to hold the cold packs, to hold the medication that's maybe a fraction of the size of the entire package. Mm-hmm. So that brings up the dilemma. What do we do with all this other stuff? And if you've got 1, 2, or even 3 people in the house that are receiving medications in the mail, that, you know, creates almost another problem. What do we do? And that's kind of where we are in our household right now. You know, we have not just fun ordering, but again, medication ordering, sometimes food orderings, depending, you know. So I don't have an answer for it. I just wanted to tag team onto what you were saying and, you know, kind of add to that too. And also Peggy's topic of the driving thing, which that's been a big conversation in our house as well. And we noticed not only from in 2020 with the pandemic, but even through the last 3 years following, and the price of gas, we started consolidating our trips as well. Instead of just jumping in the car to go get those hot dog buns. Or there was a time when I was growing up, my dad used to take my mom just on a car ride to circle the island, just for the sake of being in the car circling the island with each other, you know, listening to their 50s music or whatever. And that's not even on the table anymore in this day and age we're living in, the driving the island for the sake of driving the island, because it's really on the front of our brains about, God, I don't know. We still have gas powered cars, the price of gas, getting out and about. So, to tag team onto Peggy's remarks too, I just wanted to kind of add on to that. So I just wanted to add into my little piece to both of your topics, and, there you go.
Thank you, Lena.
Thank you, Lena. That's
Sure.
really great.
I think Barbara can kind of circle back to some of the trash questions, right? Because Barbara has been working with zero waste for a long time.
Yeah, if you have any trash questions, I'm your gal. Zero Waste is online. You can send us any questions there. I wanted to make two comments. One was specific to Lena about your medications coming in the styrofoam, the right now unavoidable styrofoam chests. And I attended a webinar last week hosted by the Plastic Pollution Coalition, and there were 3 guest speakers, one of which was with a business that's making an alternative to styrofoam out of, I think it's called hemp head. It's kind of leftover hemp from the processing, and mycelium, which is the roots of mushrooms. And they can make all kinds of custom containers. And if you receive that container, you can break it up and put it on top of your soil, and it will just decompose, and it will add benefit to the soil. And the other 2 speakers were working with companies that are developing seaweed as a substitute for plastic film, including plastic bags. And those 2 can just biodegrade. And if, for some reason they become litter and are blown into the water, it will do no harm. So, part of the solution to the mess we're in is a materials revolution. One of the women who spoke about the seaweed is that they're trying to pelletize it and make it such that it can be used in the same equipment that's currently manufacturing plastic. So that would be incredible for being able to upscale, because the machinery already exists. It needs to get the businesses to recognize the benefit of switching their material. So I hold on to that information as hope, that maybe we can get to where we need to go. And then the other thing, Anne said something about, living our values. And a while ago, I was at TNC and I grabbed something from the hot bar, and I did not have silverware with me. And when I went up to the cashier, I said, I'm really sorry, I need to ask for some silverware. I didn't bring mine. And a young woman who was doing the bagging said, well, why should we have to bring our own silverware? And I thought, it's just made me really think about how much convenience we've become used to, so that we're not responsible for taking any of our own stuff with us anywhere. And that, we didn't used to have cars with 6 cup holders and giant cup holders, and we didn't used to eat on the run, and we didn't used to have all of this stuff, this throwaway stuff. And we can remember, or at least the older ones in the group can remember that time, but young people have grown up with this. It's just normal way of life to them. And so, talk about getting back to older values. This is really what we need to start thinking about and talking about, I think.
I'd like to team tag onto what Barbara says, which is a very good point. There's a couple of values that I think have been somewhat lost. And I don't know if it's a value, but staying home. Staying home. There's people that cannot even stay home very long. I'm an introvert, so I love to stay home. That's my happy place. And what I find is when you stay home, you begin to get like a train of thought. We live in interrupt mode now. And so, to be able to just think about the other value that ties in with that is making do. So somebody said, run out for hot dog buns. Well, can we put it on bread tonight? What do we have to make dinner out of? Rather than, oh, I feel like, having got it up, but I'm out of this and I got to run to the store. So just that whole making do, I think, is something that our grandparents, our great grandparents, they stayed home. They didn't, actually, people didn't have very much money. I mean, as in cash, and people had big gardens, and they, they made do, they sewed their clothes and things like that, which isn't even economically reasonable now, I don't think. But so just thinking about those values, and how can I be content by just making do with the things I have? And what I've started to do is trying to almost run out of food before I go shopping. So it's like, what do I have and what can I make out of this? And eating from the garden, it's like, okay, I know I'm going to have zucchini again, but this time I'm going to spiralize it, or this time I'm going to, so, those values, I think, are really something that we've lost in our culture.
Well, and if you think back to 2020, for a little while there, we were all like doing that. We weren't going to the grocery store. You had to really save it up and think of all the things you were going to need. And the grocery stores were asking us to do that. Please don't run in for a head of garlic. Please try to do it all together to minimum. And it was so much better for everybody. Lena, looks like you got another thought.
Yes, actually, Peggy, I totally relate to what you were just commenting about the make do. And my dad brought us up with that mentality our entire lives, all of us cousins, about make do with what you have, because we didn't have a lot of money. We were farmers and didn't have a lot of money. And so that really resonated with me when you said that. And I think you're right in that, because I have an 18-year-old. And so he doesn't understand that mentality of making do. And partially that's my fault too, because it's the age of convenience. It's the age of instant gratification. It's the age of right now, but we are kind of pedaling back, at least in our house, with this conversation, because all of this stuff we're talking about is really on our minds. And the younger generation is starting to see that with climate change. And again, what we're talking about now. So these 18, 19-year-olds, and maybe even a little bit older, they're starting to see it. And so with that being said, about the old values about stay home. You don't have to go out necessarily to find the fun at home. And kind of appreciate that really in many other ways. There's a lot of levels to that statement. Find the fun at home, appreciate the time you have to be able to do that and things like that. And my 18-year-old is noticing too, and he made a comment, Mom, when I stay home and I'm not out spending money, he works now. And so, he has to, earn his own money. And I think that's starting to really kick in, going, God, every time I walk out of the house, this is my son jumping in his car and going somewhere, X amount of dollars are coming out of his account, because that's just part of the life of being out spending. So now we're kind of he's reeling it back, which in turn, we're all reeling it back about stay home. Again, it kind of, tails on the whole COVID thing, but now for different reasons, adding more reasons to it as far as the climate change, the whole topic of climate change and what we're kind of diving into. So just wanted to, again, tag team onto that. That was awesome little point.
You're making me think about, I was a kid growing up in New England. They used to say, use it up, wear it out, make it do, or do without, right? And I loved that actually, and I still love that. I mean, it seems like a very solid, sensible way to live. And you're right that we've kind of become the convenience culture, and there is very little thought. Like if you look at the politics of clothing, so much depth of, that's a really good reason to start supporting like the thrift shop at the senior center or the children's boutique. Both of them have lots of amazing clothes. Some still has the tag on it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
You know?
My son, sorry to interrupt, but again, we're kind of in that world of thrifting and Goodwill now, even from my age group, but again, down to my son, 18-year-old, where we're going to donate clothes, but meanwhile, that's where we're going to shop to get our new clothes as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's just one big circle. And our perspective in our age group is, and my 18-year-old, his perspective is, you get cooler stuff when you're there too. There's a lot of unique stuff that you won't see at the box stores. And it costs $1.99 versus $19.99. And it's coming out of my wallet. Which one am I going to pick is what, he's saying. And so, yeah, I love that you brought that up too, the clothing piece, because that's a big thing for us is thrifting for everything. Literally thrifting for everything.
We used to talk about shopping in your closet. because so many of us have a lot of clothes, and some of them are put away or stuck behind, or they're layered. There's so much stuff there. And if you actually start looking at it, you go, wow, look at this. I hadn't forgot I even had that. Or, oh, this is cool. Or what a perfect thing. And it's been interesting since I live in a mobile home now. It's really small. I have seasonal bins, and I keep the warm clothes in bins, and swap them out twice a year. And it is like a discovery tour, because I think I've forgotten all about certain things, right? And it's like getting new clothes just by opening a box. But I think that whole thing of not needing to fill some vacant space in ourselves with stuff is a deeper, more spiritual question about, why do we need to be so busy? Why do we need to have so much? Lena.
Yeah, and just to add one more piece onto that, being brought up without a lot of money, and even to this day, and I learned a lot this from my mom. We didn't have a lot of money to bring new stuff into our house, like redo a room with new furniture or even new pictures and stuff. So what my mom would do would just be rearrange the pictures from this wall to that wall, or this room to that room, or that knickknack moves over here instead of there. And it was a whole new vibe. It was a whole new look. And so it was new to us, and we loved it. To this day, that's kind of how we're living now. It's like, that little trinket over there would look great in the kitchen, and now it's brand new. It's kind of thing. So yeah, I'm all totally 100% on board with that whole full circle thingy. Yeah, big time.
That's funny. You made me remember my mom used to have different slip covers for the cushions in the living room. And there was like summer colors and winter colors or textures or something, so there'd be like red plush ones in the winter time and sort of gentle pastels in the summertime. The sofa was the same, but it looked really different depending on what pillows you put on it. Barbara.
Well, and I'm not saying this because Winifred is here, but let's not leave the Rotary auction out of this conversation. I keep a wish list all year of what I want to get at the Rotary auction, and you can always find it, and a few more things. So it's just like this one convulsive week where the whole island recycles, right? And you can get anything you want, and usually it's such an incredibly low price. So I mean, I think that's really important.
Yeah, it's like learning to play catch. We're in a throwaway culture, and people are throwing it away and we're catching it, right? And so instead of participating in that, we're giving everything new life. I think that's a wonderful way to be. And I'm curious about how we shifted out of that. I mean, again, I come from New England, and boy, was that a save it, don't use it up. Definitely, that was really hardcore part of the culture, but I feel like it isn't anymore. And I think marketing has so much to do with that we were actually trained by social media, to need more and really have to kind of think ourselves out of that place.
Well, I think too, adding on to that, the whole thrifting and stuff, one thing that I like to add on when I'm telling somebody I'm going to the senior center thrift store, we'll just use that as an example. And not only am I finding really cool things to gift for my friends, my mom, my grandma, whoever, but I always like to tag on that ending, and this benefits the senior center and its programs and events for the elders in our community, because that's a piece that kind of gets left off of conversations. But when you tag that on there, people kind of get a bigger, broader perspective of, oh, right, it's not just finding something that's inexpensive. This kind of benefits a lot of people just buying that knickknack or whatever. So I like to tag that on anytime I use the senior center thrift shop, or even Goodwill for that matter. I've had family members use programs that Goodwill provided, typing skills, office, whatever, educational skills. So, tagging that piece on there tends to get people to think about it differently, that whole world. So just wanted to add that little piece.
Yeah, the added benefit. Peggy.
And I'll put a plug in for the Friends of the Library book sales. If you're old school like me and like to have a physical book in your hand sometimes, although I have switched to audiobooks a lot, but those sales happen monthly, at least. And I can go and spend $20 and get like a grocery bag full of books. And it is an addiction, but it's a benign addiction, I think. So.
And one of the cool things about that is not only do you benefit the library, but a lot of those books come back. And over the years, I remember sort of saying some of these books have been sold 10 or 15 times. And, you know, on Bainbridge, you get good stuff, right? You get some
Mhm.
really interesting books. You get new bestsellers and you get classics and you get all kinds children's books for a quarter or 50 cents. And they're wonderful. And then when you're done, you take it back. Somebody else gets a chance at it. And I just think, yeah, that's a beautiful example of kind of a circular economy in a way, right? That instead of becoming trash, it just keeps moving through the community.
Yeah, and they actually raise over $100,000 a year for the library
Wow.
itself.
Yeah.
So it's not minor. And I've seen those people that sell books online come in with their little reader things, and they read the ISBNs, and it tells them what it's worth, and they fill up bags and boxes and, you know, take them off to sell. But yeah, they earn quite a bit. And it also reminded me of something when I was involved in the Pachamama Alliance, and we used to give a workshop to create an environmentally sustainable, spiritually fulfilling, and socially just world. There was a quote in there by a guy, and he said, I forget who he is, but he was very involved in this trash thing like Barbara is. And he said, trash is the result of a lack of imagination. And that really stuck with me, because if you think of trash as this is a failure of imagination, that we could be using these materials and closing that circle in so many different ways, like Barbara talked about with, wow, that's so excited, like mycelium is going to make packaging. That's so great. And one of the problems is, well, marketing and corporations now, you know, resisting that and saying we can't afford that. And yet climate change is way more expensive than we can even imagine. And it's going to be way more expensive than we can even imagine. I mean, look what we're paying now for emergencies, you know, so it's just going to get worse. So we need to really think about, you know, and that's another way we can raise our voice, saying, I would like my money to be spent on, you know, these things. I would like to see my government investing in these things. I would like to see my store. I don't mind paying 5 cents more, 10 cents more, you know, but we really need to be conscious about these things.
Barbara, you want to add to that?
You know, we're talking in some ways about a circular economy here, which is great, you know, which is reuse and that kind of thing. And, you know, compare it with our linear economy, which I'm now starting to think of as a lemming economy. There's, you know, the extraction, which is so destructive to the earth. Think about all the communities that are affected by fracking. So anyway, then the components get sent to the plastic manufacturing places. And those are all with around low income and communities of color. So they're getting subjected to all these chemicals and pollution, you know, in the air and the water. And then those things make their way to us. And then, you know, we just throw them in the garbage. So for our convenience, there's just been a lot of destruction and negative impact. And we just can't afford environmentally, or if you have any sense of social justice, we just can't afford to keep doing this and not be thinking about who's being affected by our choices. You know, what's the larger impact? So one thing I wanted to mention in my decision-making matrix, which is just too long, but got to do it, is trying to buy fair trade. So I am a chocolate fiend. I love dark chocolate. Sometimes I buy it in bulk, God help me, from TNC in a jar. And then sometimes I buy a dark chocolate candy bar. And I always make sure that it's fair trade, because as much as I want it to be organic, I also want to think about who's involved in growing this product, and are they being paid a decent wage? Is there somebody trying to be an ally and support them in this endeavor? So I just think pulling back and also trying to take the social justice elements into consideration is really important.
It is. In fact, even at the senior center, we were saying as a board, we need to have fair trade coffee. right, Reed? I know
Mhm.
we were looking at doing taste tests of different kinds of coffee to see which one to switch to, but I know Eagle Harbor Church, for instance, I know they've been using fair trade coffee for years. And I feel like that's one of those small things. You can do it at home, but you could do it, make sure that any organization you're connected with is also kind of thinking on those terms. And again, sometimes it seems like so little, like just one small thing. But, if you eat chocolate like Barbara does, it probably adds up, right, Barbara?
That's right. Think of all the people I'm supporting out there.
No, I agree. I think the same way that we got to look at a little deeper at the backstory of a lot of these products. Peggy, looked like you had something to say.
Oh no, I'm just nodding away. But it does remind me of Annie Leonard's The Story of Stuff. And if you haven't seen that little video, it's out there on Google. And she talks about, going into a store and buying a $4 little transistor radio, right? And then she's standing in line thinking, wait a minute, how could this radio, this little transistor radio for $4.99 be $4.99? It must have been, mined over in another country and shipped over here, the parts and all this stuff, and I'm only paying $4.99 for it, but who's really paying for it?
Mhm.
And it's a really great thing. I see. Thank you, Reed, for putting that link in there. Take a look at that little video, because it's very concise, but also has some really good points about the impact of our consumer society.
Well, one thing, we've talked a lot about what not to do, but I'd like to talk a little about the way it makes us feel better. And when we have a little bit talked on that to do some positive things, like, the joy of not shopping. We've talked about the joy of staying home. And I think what that kind of calls up is like, if we've lost the art of conversation, or if we've lost the art of being comfortable in our own homes, maybe that's a great exploration place to start looking like,
Mhm.
what would make my home a place that I really want to be? Those of us who are introverts are usually like, love our nesting homes, but sometimes we become restless, or there's people who just really don't want to stay home or don't have a cozy, comfortable place. And, looking at ways to make that more of a refuge, or a sanctuary, or a haven, might be a valuable thing to consider, right? A new way to look at our surroundings. And also for family, when my kids were younger, they had friends who often spent the night at our house, and one of them would get a call from his mom, and he'd be like, oh, family time. I gotta go home and have family time. And I thought, whoa, okay. And we talked about that with my kids, and I talked about that as like, well, what is family time for us that actually isn't like a groaner, but is something that we kind of want to do? And it was really good, because we started thinking about things we did like to do together. And some of it was game night, for instance, or cooking a meal together. And, sometimes we would actually go to the store. I'd give them each a budget and say, each of you pick everything we're going to eat for a whole day. Here's how much money you can have. And we'd get kind of inventive with some things like that. And it made it more fun, because we were doing it together. They, then each person would talk about their choices and, why'd you get that? Well, blah, blah, right? It was fun. And I think maybe we need to relearn, practice some of those like ways of having fun together that doesn't cost anything.
Yeah, I think, well, I have a couple hobbies. One is gardening, which I read Anne's column all the time and take all those wonderful ideas. And it's kind of expanding now. Like now I'm starting my fall garden and things like that. So it's an ever learning kind of thing. And you can do it on any scale, from a pot to, tons of beds. And, the other is painting, something creative. I think everybody has some kind of creative something in them that wants to be expressed. And so, finding what that is, whether it's, some poetry or some writing, and also one-on-one visits with people. My best friend lives in Kent. And so that's a challenge. We don't get to physically see each other that often, but every day we're on the phone. How are you? How was your day? What did you do today? And it's it's a great part of my day. I love talking to my friend Asha, and seeing what she's done in her garden, or what what her grandkids are saying to her, or something like that. So those one-on-ones are really precious to me. And, small group gatherings, social stuff is very precious, but there's a lot of different ways it can happen.
Yeah, like
Lena,
our knitting group, here at the senior center, we get together out in front of the under the umbrellas in front of the center on Thursdays, 1 to 3, and people come by and they don't necessarily knit or do anything else. They're just sit and hang out and talk to us. And there's little dogs and people stop by, but it's so refreshing to have conversations. And they are far-reaching, wonderful conversations, and you can meet people you might never get to know. But yeah, the art of conversation, the art of small groups, just for the pleasure of being together, and not, all of us have more yarn than we could ever possibly knit if we knit every day for the rest of our lives. So it's not like we need anything, but it's always fun to go to the thrift shop and just see if there happens to be something. And I can't tell you how often it turns out to have been donated by somebody sitting next to you. Still, that piece of like making a little community space. Lena, are you thinking of something again?
Yeah, actually, I was. I think Peggy mentioned it. I'll tag onto hers as well about getting together and doing like games, or maybe it was you, Anne. And I just wanted to add too. I don't know if anybody's noticed on TV, which probably shouldn't be watching so much, but game shows are really making a comeback. A lot more game shows, and the old game shows that I grew up on, one called Password. I don't know if that anybody knows that game, Password, but that is back on. And I found the last couple of episodes, it was just me and my husband really enjoying that moment. My son was passing through the house and saw that. So what is becoming something that I thought it was just going to be me is turning into, well, let's have so-and-so. My son chimed in with a FaceTime with a friend who was literally sitting on the computer with us in the living room while we were playing Password or Jeopardy or Wheel of Fortune, or something like that. Now, it's not your typical ideal, everyone's in the same house together on Tuesday night, but we kind of did our own hybrid version for the moment. And it's 30 minutes long, didn't take a lot of time out of an 18-year-old life, or anybody's, but it was enjoyable for that moment because it was that getting together thing that you guys are talking about. So I think I'm a little combination hybrid of, unfortunately it's on a TV, but nonetheless, I'll take the bigger picture of, hey, it was something we did together. It was something we did together and we had fun, and we need more of that in today's life. So I'm all for it. So I just wanted to add that piece in. Game shows are on a comeback, and let's take advantage of it.
Puzzles too, I think. Barbara.
Well, I just had, there's something I've been thinking about that was triggered by what Lena said, and basically what other people have said, which is we have the luxury of free time to be able to enjoy these social connections. And I think about, young families and how busy they are all the time, and how because of their busyness, they're really pushed to convenience purchasing in a way that we don't have to be. We can make different choices. And I don't know what we can do about that, but I think about that a lot, how grateful I am for having time.
yeah, leisure is a privilege.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It is, but I also think about how many of us are grandparents or have neighborhood kids, and it's like having the chance to kind of interact with them and do something with kids that doesn't involve spending money, like doing a puzzle together, for instance, or gardening together, or cooking together, is a way to kind of make sure that the younger generations coming up know, first of all, how to do some things, but also to how to do them together. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's really important. And not just do something for them, but definitely with them. Not just going somewhere with them to spend money on something, but make, like with my grandkids, sometimes we just walk down to Waterfront Park and they splash in the water, right?
Mm-hmm.
I make them keep their shoes on because God knows what's in there, but still, they have their Crocs. But it's like, go for a walk in nature. And we used to do our nature walks and look at, how many birds do we see, or how many kinds of flowers, or how many nuts or squirrels or whatever it is, but kind of engaging kids in ways, again, that don't cost anything except time. And then that time becomes really pretty important.
Mhm.
and personal, right? So
You touched on connecting with nature, and that's such a fulfilling experience. And so when we talk about the hole that we try and fill with our consumerism, I think that's one of the things, connecting with people and connecting with nature. And we all have nature around us, but we rush past it. I rush past it sometimes. And, now I've taken up brushing my teeth out under the stars so I can just look at them and say,
Oh.
hello, stars, and how beautiful you are tonight, But I go out and brush my teeth under the stars and look up and connect because it's nature's all around us and it's beautiful. Everything in it practically is beautiful. So
well, and they always say people don't protect what they don't love,
Mhm.
right? And so if we want kids to love the planet and protect the planet and think about how to live more lightly and also how to live more richly, I think there's no better starting place than, just going for walks and looking around and making it making a game out of it, right? How many X's do you see or find or whatever it is? But developing that appreciation, watch that bird land here and, oh, look, it's getting a worm or whatever, right? Look at that squirrel. He's got something to hide. He's got a peanut in his mouth. Where's he going to put it? Oh, look at that squirrel. He's trying to get my screen door open, right? But it's like, if we want kids to love the planet, we have to help them learn like all these complicated things, but also really simple things like,
Mhm.
loving a flower, loving a creature, and then that what we do has a serious, significant effect on the health of the planet as well as our own health and well-being, right? And those are kind of heavy topics for a 6-year-old, but they get it. They truly do. My grandkids have little nature tables where they keep nuts and seeds and things they like and put fresh flowers on them. And, it's just a way to kind of connect and look around, right? But grown-ups could have a nature table too. You don't
I have
to
a nature table right in front of where I do my dishes. The little windowsill is full of rocks.
Yeah,
Little
exactly,
things.
right? Things we learn to love. Barbara, did we miss anything you would like to throw in?
I don't think so.
There's so many. I love that Reed has put so many good links in the chat. So if you're looking for more information on some of the things we've talked about or some of the places to get information, there's like from the Environmental Working Group on through that. What did they call
Story
it?
of
Trash
stuff.
Mob. Plenty, yeah, all kinds of stuff.
So if you're watching this later on YouTube, just look down in the description box underneath the video because all those links are there.
Excellent.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Reed. You talked about what we could do better, and I'm speaking for myself, but I also putting it out there in case it applies to you, is think of all the emails you may have in your inbox. Well, those are sitting on servers somewhere taking up electricity. So if you have the time and inclination, get rid of all your old emails. I mean, I need to do that myself. Maybe I have to write it in my calendar to schedule a time to do it. But, it's just another sort of invisible form of waste and unnecessary use that I know I'm guilty of.
Yeah, and it is invisible, so it's hard to remember.
Mhm.
Yeah, if you go into your search box on your email and look for a name, you'll find sometimes that you have emails going back to 2009 from that person, and maybe they're not super critical anymore. And you can
Yes.
just spend a happy time listening to some music and going erase, 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 right?
Yeah.
It's the purge moment.
Yes.
And when we pare down, we feel lighter.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.